Welcome to the Crit House. This week, we're excited to feature Eric Luden, a true innovator in the world of photography. Eric is the founder and CEO of Digital Silver Imaging, a company renowned for blending traditional photographic craftsmanship with modern digital techniques. Beyond his entrepreneurial success, Eric is a passionate photographer and a dedicated advocate for the photographic arts. He has served on the boards of the Griffin Museum of Photography and the Social Documentary Network, contributing to the growth and recognition of photographers worldwide. And today, on the Crit House, Eric Luden shares the 5 works of art that have shaped and inspired him. These include images from Dawood Bey, Henri Cartier-Bresson, Thomas Merton, Martha Holmes Waxman, and Eugene Atjay.
You know, the joke is that when my mother was pregnant with me, she was editing books for the famous writers' school, and that she was editing a series of books on photography, and that somehow that is where it all started. Wow. You know, my mother was always into the arts and would, drag me to museums as a kid. And, we lived right outside of the city. So I've had a long kind of artistic, approach, or I would say, a long kind of life of looking at artwork in different forms. And I think both my parents were always very encouraging of that. And I kind of discovered photography junior high a little bit, but high school definitely kind of went into it. And really, when I came to Boston in 1983 is kind of really where my real interest in photography began. I studied under Charles Meyer, who was a teacher at Boston College, a great documentarian, worked a lot in film, but he really was the most influential person in my education of photography. A few of my friends who are still local people and in the photo world, we all talk about what Charlie would say, which was, check your corners before you press that shutter. So I dabbled in, as you mentioned, I've been a photographer. I would still say I am a photographer. I don't get to shoot as much as I would like to.
So, I want to get back to DSI in a second, but when you are a photographer, what do you capture? What do you shoot? What is your photography like?
I don't shoot people. Light for me is like a geometric graphic. It's such an important part of my photographs. I really see very graphically in my own personal work, and what draws me into the work of other people. Seeing shapes, repetition of patterns, texture, light, shadow, dark openings. And I think that's and for that reason, because I often have to stop and look and spend some time looking at something, very often people will mess that up for me. It's like I'll see something as a graphic element. I go, I know you can take them out in Photoshop, but truth be told, I don't own a digital camera. I have 2 film cameras.
Oh, okay.
I have a Mamiya 7 that I shoot all black and white film with. And I just acquired this summer from a friend of mine, the Fuji 6x17 panoramic camera. Wow. The negative is literally 6 centimeters by 17 centimeters. And I'm just starting to shoot with it, and I absolutely love it.
So tell us about DSI, because it is relatively unique in the world of printing.
Yeah, I would say, so when I started in 2008, all we focused on was how to produce traditional silver gelatin prints directly from digital files. You could work digitally, either by scanning film or shooting digitally, have a digital file, manipulate it exactly the way you want it in your digital darkroom with Lightroom or Photoshop, but then output an absolutely beautiful silver gelatin classic black and white print. Yeah. So people always ask, well, is it, what do you call it? It's still a silver print, because the difference is, instead of working in a darkroom with an enlarger and that being your light source, this is a photographic laser enlarger. And it's just light being emitted through a red, green, blue laser in a big machine. But you're still printing on a real silver gelatin paper. So I sort of decided I was going to champion this process. I wanted to be really leading this thing about how to make a real beautiful black and white print in a digital world. That is our tagline. The fine art of printing in a digital world. So we're very fortunate that we have, I feel, established a great reputation. We are an artist-run business. Everybody that works with us is a photographer. I have a lot of mass art students. I have Leslie AIB students, Northeastern students who have all been with me quite some time, and very grateful for that. But we are an artist-run business.
Well, I didn't intend to do this, but I realized as you were talking that I have some of your digital silver prints that were here.
Thank you.
I'm working on them, and they're lovely. You've always done good work. So,
Thank you.
So you had to choose 5 images,
Yes.
which some people say is hard. What did you? Was it hard?
Yeah.
What was your thought process in coming up with those 5 images?
Well, it was interesting because, I first think when people say, when you hear that, I have to say to people as I was doing this exercise, that the question was your five most influential or important photographs, not photographers.
Yes.
Because I think I would answer that question differently.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Because photographers, you could kind of, because then you think about, people in different types of work and the kind of work that they've done. For me, then, when I was thinking about what 5 images I would choose, it was really kind of what reflects me and my story. What did I want to tell? What was important to me? And what do I think about photography? These are all photographs of books or prints that I personally own. Because I think the printed image, be in book form or in print form, is so important today. I get tired of looking at things on computers.
Yeah.
And so that's why when I did this, what I gave you were iPhone shots of prints. So for me, it was a very personal journey, I'm really I feel honored that that I'm doing this because it was a great exercise, and I think it's such a beautiful prompt
Well, I'm
to
glad.
ask people.
I'm glad.
Yep.
Well, let's see Eric Luden's story through his images. Let's take a look. We're starting off with Martha Holmes Waxman, who I am not familiar with, but I read a little bit about since you sent this. Tell us about this image and why this is here for you, Eric.
Well, this is actually a photograph of me with my grandfather,
No kidding.
who was,
Aw,
yep,
what a cute little fella.
and he was German. He had just come over from Berlin for a visit, and unfortunately, he died not too much after this photo was taken. So I didn't know him really well, but um, I think why I'm so drawn to this particular photograph is I think what I love about the idea of personal photographs is that they transport us. I didn't know my grandfather well, but he was an incredibly interesting man in the history of literally in the history of Berlin, and started a school over there called the Lessing Hochschule, which is still in business today. And his whole concept of starting this school was for adult education. He didn't want people to lecture on the great minds of the time. He literally knew Einstein and Jung and Kipling, and he convinced all these people to come teach at his school. He was also a World War One reporter in World War One, and he he received or would have received just before he passed away what was sort of the equivalent of our Congressional Medal of Honor from Germany. So when I think about him and people say, tell me somebody in history you'd love to be able to go back in time and talk to, it's always been him.
Wow. Hmm.
And the funny thing is, I'll be really honest, as I was thinking about all the photographs I did go through, I thought, here we go again, all aging white men, white male photographers and their gaze. The funny thing is that my mother was a book editor and had worked on a number of books, including a book by Julia Childs, which cracked me up. I didn't know till much later in life, but she knew people in the photo world, the editing world, and my grandmother was a writer. Somehow they knew this woman Martha Waxman, so that she was often coming over and taking photographs of me and my dad and me as kids. And I didn't know who she was until I Googled her to understand that she also shot for Life and
Yeah.
for some other major publications. So it was kind of wonderful that I stumbled upon this, having been looking at this photo all my life, And to find out that she was the photographer and what a ambitious woman she was as a photographer. But I really appreciate this moment that she captured of me in my brand new German lederhosen with my adoring grandfather looking over me.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about Thomas Merton, who I'll be honest with you, I know in name and I've read a little
Mhm.
bit, but I did not know photography was part of what he was involved
A
with.
lot of people don't. For those of you with a life of maybe being Catholic or anything like that, Thomas Merton was a monk, but he was also he lived. Monks live very simple lives, and he was a very simple person, and he unfortunately died tragically. I believe he got electrocuted by a fan falling in a bathtub or something horrible like that. But his book is called A Geography of Holiness. I kind of came to spirituality a little later in life. I was raised as an Episcopalian, and then I started going to this. I left that with my parents and started going to this really cool kind of Catholic barn in the up in Reading, Connecticut, called the Benedictine Grange. And the priest there introduced me to Thomas Merton. I did not read his famous book called Seven Story Mountain, but I really fell in love with this book that this priest gave me as a birthday gift one year. This speaks exactly to how I see how light becomes such an important element in a photograph with shadow, texture, and all the great shapes and elements that appear in his work. I really, love the angle in there, the coming down of that wall, the sharp vertical angle, the shadows, these long afternoon light, probably shadows casting on the wall, the little triangle above, the little black space above that.
Yeah.
It really this really spoke to me, and I just want to read something very interesting that he wrote in his book, if I could, just for a second.
Thank you.
But there is a greater comfort in the substance of silence than in the answer to a question. Eternity is in the present. Eternity is in the palm of the hand. Eternity is a seed of fire whose sudden roots break barriers that keep my heart from being an abyss. There are times in my life where I've read things that have great meaning to me, and I have to say I don't always understand them. And what this reflects to me is kind of how I see. And when you ask, like, why I don't have people in my images, it's because, like, I would look at this photograph that Thomas Merton shot, and I could spend a lot of time, like, checking my corners, as Charlie Meyer taught me to do, and looking where things are. But really, that graphic shape and shapes that are in there are really what capture my eye. And if there had been that decisive moment of maybe someone walking through the background, or maybe through a stairwell, you'd see them in that window, that would totally ruin it for me.
So we go to the great HCB.
HCB. Yeah, again, so this was I think this could have been my very first photo book I ever purchased.
Mm.
And it's behind me here. It's his book in India. You could talk about this from the decisive moment impact that Cartier-Bresson is so well known for, of the man walking in through the back. But this is one of those things too, where, totally check your corners, right? Like, you look at all the graphic elements that are in here that are repeated that I absolutely love. The bowl, the shape of the thing that the young man is sitting in front of, the bowls that are inside of there, the roundness of the cow behind him, the other cow behind him, the shape of the horns of the cow there also forming a little bit of a curved piece. Like, that's what I'm saying. For me, I love seeing that in what I'm photographing, and I just really admire this photograph and the look on the young man's face and the cow turning towards him, and all of that really just speaks to me. And this is an image that Charlie showed to us in class, and it's just mattered. It's meant a lot to me. There's so many great works by Cartier-Bresson that we could all pick and all think about. A lot of them are about the decisive moment, and for me also was I'd call it the graphic moment.
Your fourth, well, I guess we'll call this a body of work from Eugene Atget.
So again, Eugene Atget introduced me by my dear friend Charlie Meyer. What I really admired most about Atget was his work ethic and his discipline. This is a guy who would get up with his big camera early in the morning, before the people hit the streets. And he'd go out and he documented so many great parts of Paris, the Luxembourg Gardens, and all these wonderful spaces. I think I echoed his sentiment when I said I don't like people in my photographs because they kind of ruin things for me. And that's too harsh of a term. I wouldn't say they ruin it for me, but I'm so focused on the other elements that appear in an image. And there was something that Atjay said about that many years ago. So again, I am drawn to the beauty and the simplicity of this, but also all the wonderful graphic elements. Starting with the wheel in the foreground, right? That you see just the top part of it. The two wheels behind it. You go further back, you see an arched window, a part of an arch, and more semicircles. But then there's also this beautiful sense of light that you follow that water that was probably used to wash the street, or maybe it had rained or whatever, and you just go back into this tunnel, and then you open back up into this other light that is just otherworldly back there. And I just really loved his sense of doing that. And also, I just said I admired his personal work ethic of being out there. He knew he had to get up at 5 or whatever it was in the morning and get out there to avoid that. And I will say that it was really funny that when Sibylla Smith and I, as you know, you had her on our show, and Sib and I got married, and we were in southern France for our honeymoon 32 years ago. I too would get up 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, whenever it was, and go lug my camera around and make pictures because, A, I didn't want to miss time with her, but B, it was, I need to go out and just spend some time with light. Yeah. And not be distracted. So Eugene Atjay, great influence on me. Just really admired his strength and commitment to his craft.
Your fifth image is from somebody who you have done printing for.
So Dawood Bey and I met in 2009 at a Society of Photographic Education conference. I had admired Dawood's work, obviously. Again, for somebody like me who doesn't know how to photograph people well, I have admired so many people and their ability to capture people. His Harlem series, by far, is one of the most powerful bodies of work I think I've seen in terms of his ability to really capture the essence of people. The young boy in front of with his sunglasses on, leaning up in front of the movie theater shot. And then this one, like I had to go back and forth between the two as which were my favorites, but this really spoke to me. And this is an actual print that we did for Dawood. It was one of the first prints we ever made for him when he was testing us back in 2010 or 11. I have just admired him and been so honored to collaborate and work with him as an artist over the years. And I am so impressed with his latest body, his latest work that he's been doing, which is all about the landscape. And really, what does the landscape hold for us as memory for the African American tradition? And the difficult journey that they've had to do. But his work lately really is not including people. And so for me, as kind of if you want to call me a landscape photographer, I really am impressed with some of his latest work. But I do think that he has these beautiful, intimate, connected portraits of people. And so I really, I really do admire people who can make these kind of really strong documentary projects of people and like feel that connection with the subject. I think he's one of the best we've ever had.
It's a pleasure to get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you, Jeff.
The photographer and as an artist and as a printer, but also a pleasure to learn a little bit about the artists and the photographs that have influenced you as well.
Thanks so much, Jeff. And again, I really appreciate this prompt. As I said, I think it was such a deep emotional learning process for me to say, how do you pick 5 impactful images in your life? And to really, it taught me something about myself I hadn't seen.
Yeah. Well, that makes me happy to hear. Well, thank you. And
thanks.
And thank you all for watching The Crit House.